The stench of beer and desperation clung to my uniform as I navigated the maze of tables at Velvet, the upscale restaurant where I'd been waiting tables for the past 8 months. My feet throbbed in cheap shoes that weren't meant for 12-hour shifts, and the din of clinking glasses and forced laughter rang in my ears like a discordant symphony. I tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, feeling the sticky residue of hairspray on my fingers as I balanced 3 plates of overpriced appetizers. Table 7 needs more champagne. Marco, the floor manager, hissed as he brushed past me, his cologne leaving a sickly sweet trail in his wake. I nodded, keeping my eyes down. Stay invisible. Do the job. Get paid. The mantra repeated in my head like a prayer. Tonight was different, though. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Security men in dark suits had appeared an hour ago, scanning the restaurant with cold, calculated eyes. They'd spoken in hushed tones with the owner, who'd immediately closed the rooftop section to regular patrons and sent 3 waiters home. I'd been reassigned to the now private area, along with Sasha, a veteran server who knew better than to ask questions. "Someone important's coming," Sasha had whispered, adjusting her tight black dress. Like, seriously important. The kind of important where you don't make eye contact unless they speak to you first. I didn't need the warning. After growing up in a neighborhood where power was measured by how many people crossed the street when they saw you coming, I knew when to make myself scarce. But tonight, there was no escaping whatever, or whoever, was about to arrive. I heard them before I saw them, the subtle shift in the restaurant's rhythm, conversations dimming, the staff straightening their postures as if pulled by invisible strings. Then the security detail entered, their faces expressionless as they positioned themselves strategically around the rooftop. And then he walked in. The world seemed to slow, sounds muffling as if I'd been plunged underwater. He wore darkness like a second skin. A tailored black suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent, shoes polished to a mirror shine. But it wasn't his clothes that made my breath catch in my throat. It was the way he moved, with the casual confidence of a predator who had never needed to question his place at the top of the food chain. His face was all sharp angles and perfect symmetry, like something carved from marble by an artist obsessed with beauty and danger in equal measure. Dark hair, styled with just enough carelessness to seem effortless. Eyes that calculated everything and revealed nothing. "Alessia," Sasha nudged me, breaking the spell. "Table 9, now." Table 9. His table. I approached with my gaze carefully trained on the polished floor, the weight of unseen eyes pressing against my skin. "Good evening," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "My name is Alessia, and I'll be your server tonight, Alessia." The way he said my name, like he was tasting it, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. I forced myself to look up, meeting his gaze for just a heartbeat before dropping my eyes again. In that brief moment, I saw something flash across his features. Recognition, interest. Whatever it was, vanished behind a mask of practiced indifference. "The 96 Bordeaux," he said to no one in particular, though one of his men immediately stepped forward to relay the order to the sommelier. The next hour passed in a blur of perfectly timed service, wordless signals from Sasha guiding me through the delicate dance of attending to him and his 4 companions without intruding. They spoke in low tones, occasionally switching to what sounded like Russian or Italian, conversation stopping whenever I approached. I was refilling water glasses when I first noticed them, 2 men at a table near the bar, their casual postures betrayed by the tension in their shoulders and the way their eyes kept drifting to our section. One adjusted his jacket, revealing the unmistakable bulge of a concealed weapon. My heart rate doubled. Growing up with a father who'd worked security for people he never named, I'd learned to recognize danger in all its forms. These men weren't restaurant security or random patrons. They were watching, waiting. For him. The realization was like ice water in my veins. Whatever was happening, I didn't want to be caught in the middle. I could finish my shift, go home, and pretend I hadn't seen anything. That's what any sane person would do. But as I turned back to the table, my eyes met his. For a split second, something passed between us. an electric current of understanding. He knew I'd seen something. And worse, he knew that I knew. His hand moved beneath the table, and I glimpsed the cold gleam of metal. A gun. My throat constricted, panic rising like bile as I forced myself to continue serving, hands trembling slightly as I placed fresh bread on the table. "Anything else, sir?" I managed to ask, surprised at how normal I sounded. He tilted his head, studying me with the intensity of someone trying to solve a complex equation. "You seem nervous, Alessia." His voice was rich, accented but perfect in its enunciation, with the faint rasp of someone who commanded rather than requested. I felt the weight of his name, though he hadn't offered it, recognized the power even without knowing its source. "I'm fine," I lied, the words sticking in my suddenly dry throat. His lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Liar. The accusation hung between us, soft enough that only I could hear it. One of his companions glanced at me, then quickly away, as if afraid to show interest in something that had caught his boss's attention. I excused myself, retreating to the kitchen where I pressed my back against the cool tile wall, trying to slow my racing heart. The two men were still watching. Whatever was about to happen, it wouldn't end well. I thought of my sister Lily, only 16 and depending on me since our parents died last year. I thought of the stack of unpaid medical bills from Mom's final months, the second job I'd taken to keep our apartment. I couldn't afford to lose this job. I couldn't afford to get involved. Yet something pulled me back to the rooftop, to his table, to those eyes that seemed to see through every defense I'd built. As I cleared plates from a neighboring table, I made my decision. Pulling a small notepad from my apron pocket, I scribbled quickly. "They're watching you. Act normal. 2 men near bar, armed." I folded the note into a tiny square, palming it as I returned to his table with the dessert menu. "Our special tonight is a chocolate soufflé with raspberry coulis," I said, placing the menu before him and discreetly sliding the note beneath. His hand covered mine for the briefest moment, warm and unexpectedly gentle. When he pulled away, the note was gone and his expression hadn't changed. But something had shifted in the atmosphere around him, a new alertness rippling through his men, though no words had been spoken. "The soufflé sounds perfect," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "And a word with you, privately." My stomach dropped. One of his men stepped forward, gesturing toward a secluded corner of the rooftop. I followed, legs moving automatically while my mind screamed at me to run. "What did you see?" he asked once we were alone, his voice low and urgent. "2 men," I whispered. "By the bar. They've been watching your table for the past hour. One has a gun." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Why tell me? You could have walked away." It was a good question. One I didn't have a good answer for. "I don't know," I admitted. "I just didn't want to see anyone get hurt, including me." His eyes narrowed. "You don't know who I am." "I know enough," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "I grew up around men like your security. I know what you are." A dangerous smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I very much doubt that, Alessia." The way he said my name made it sound like a secret between us. He stepped closer, and I fought the urge to back away. "My name is Adrian Volkov. Remember it, Adrian Volkov." The name sent a jolt through me. Even I, deliberately oblivious to the city's underworld, had heard whispers of the Volkov family, Russian immigrants who'd built an empire of legitimate businesses layered over darker enterprises. They owned half the waterfront properties, numerous nightclubs, and according to rumors, several judges and politicians. And now Adrian Volkov knew my name, had touched my hand, was standing close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, like cedar and spice. "I appreciate your warning," he continued, "but I need to know if you've told anyone else." "No," I said quickly. "I wouldn't." "Good." He cut me off. "Keep it that way." The cold authority in his voice reminded me exactly who I was dealing with. Whatever momentary connection I'd imagined between us evaporated, replaced by the stark reality of our positions. He was Adrian Volkov, and I was nobody, a waitress who'd made the potentially fatal mistake of getting involved. I should get back to work, I murmured, trying to step around him. His hand shot out, fingers wrapping around my wrist, not painful, but unmistakably restraining. Not yet. Every instinct screamed danger, but beneath that was something else. A treacherous flutter of excitement I refused to acknowledge. "My men will handle our friends at the bar," he said, his thumb absently tracing circles on the inside of my wrist. "But now there's a new problem." "What problem?" "You." His eyes traveled over my face with deliberate slowness. "You've seen too much. Become a liability." Fear flooded my system. "I won't say anything. I swear. I just want to do my job and go home." "To where?" he asked casually. "The apartment on Willow Street? With your sister Lily? The one with the piano scholarships and the college applications due next month?" My blood turned to ice. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know things, Alessia." His voice softened fractionally. "Don't look so frightened. If I meant you harm, we wouldn't be having this conversation." The men who'd been watching were now being discreetly escorted out by Adrian's security, their expressions a mixture of confusion and suppressed panic. No one in the restaurant seemed to notice, the evening continuing its elegant flow around the quiet removal. "What happens now?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. Adrian's expression changed, something almost gentle replacing the cold calculation. "Now you finish your shift, go home, kiss your sister goodnight, and tomorrow you come work for me instead." "Work for you?" I echoed, disbelief momentarily overshadowing fear. "At my private residence. Better hours, significantly better pay." His grip on my wrist loosened, but he didn't let go. "It's not a request, Alessia. You've inserted yourself into my world. This is the consequence." Before I could respond, he pulled me closer, so close that anyone watching would think we were sharing an intimate moment. His lips brushed against my ear, sending an involuntary shiver through my body. "They're still watching," he whispered. "Not the men we removed. Others. Play along if you want us both to walk out of here alive tonight." Without warning, his hand slid to the small of my back, drawing me against his chest. My hands instinctively pressed against the solid wall of his torso, feeling the heat of him through the expensive fabric of his suit. "Laugh," he commanded softly, "like I've said something charming." I forced a laugh, the sound brittle and unconvincing to my ears, but apparently sufficient for our audience. "I'll protect you," he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. "But from now on, you're mine. Do you understand?" The possessiveness in his voice should have repulsed me. Instead, it awakened something primal, a dangerous attraction I couldn't afford to feel. "I don't belong to anyone," I whispered back, trying to inject defiance into my voice. His soft chuckle vibrated against my cheek. "We'll see." When he finally released me, the loss of contact was almost physical, like stepping from warmth into cold. His eyes held mine for a beat longer than necessary, something unreadable flickering in their depths. "Tomorrow, 8 a.m. A car will be waiting outside your building." It wasn't a question. It wasn't even really a choice. I'd crossed some invisible line the moment I'd written that note, and there was no going back. As Adrian returned to his table, resuming his conversation as if nothing had happened, I felt the weight of what I'd done settle over me. I'd saved him from whatever threat those men had posed, but at what cost to myself? I moved through the rest of my shift like a sleepwalker, delivering dishes and clearing plates on autopilot. Adrian and his entourage departed shortly after our encounter, but not before he pressed something into my hand during a final champagne service. A business card with a single phone number embossed in silver. "If anything happens before tomorrow," he'd murmured, his fingers lingering against mine. Now, as I clutched the card in my pocket like a talisman, I wondered what exactly I'd set in motion. There was no doubt in my mind that Adrian Volkov was dangerous, a man accustomed to taking what he wanted and eliminating obstacles without remorse. And somehow, in the span of a single evening, I'd become something he wanted. Dawn broke over the city skyline, painting the cramped bedroom of our apartment in pale golden light. I hadn't slept. How could I, with Adrian Volkov's business card burning a hole in my nightstand drawer, and the memory of his touch branded into my skin? I'd spent the night researching him online, piecing together the fragments of information available about the man who now held my future in his hands. The Volkov family had immigrated from Russia in the early 1990s, establishing import businesses that had expanded into real estate, nightclubs, and high-end restaurants. The official story. The acceptable facade. The whispers told a different tale, of protection rackets, smuggling operations, and rivals who disappeared without a trace. Adrian had taken control of the family business 5 years ago, after his father's retirement. At 32, he was the youngest crime boss the city had ever seen, and reportedly the most ruthless. And in 7 hours, I was supposed to willingly walk into his world. Leslie? My sister's sleepy voice pulled me from my thoughts. Lily stood in the doorway, her dark hair tangled from sleep, looking younger than her 16 years in oversized pajamas. You're up early. I forced a smile. Big day. New job opportunity. Her eyes widened. Really? That's amazing. Where? The lie formed easily. Private event staffing, better pay, more regular hours. So you won't have to work nights anymore? Hope brightened her features, making guilt twist in my stomach. Since our parents' death, Lily had spent too many evenings alone while I worked double shifts. That's the plan, I said, reaching out to smooth her hair. Maybe we can finally get that piano tuned. Her smile was worth every risk, every compromise. After losing both parents, Dad to a heart attack, Mom to cancer just months later, Lily was all I had left. Every decision, every sacrifice was for her, to ensure she finished school, went to college, had opportunities I'd never get. I made coffee, she offered, padding toward the kitchen. I followed her, watching as she moved around our tiny kitchen with the grace she usually reserved for the piano. She'd been taking lessons since she was 6, showing a talent that had earned her a prestigious scholarship. Mom and Dad had been so proud. I have an audition next Friday, Lily said, handing me a chipped mug. For the summer program at Westmore Academy. Ms. Daniels thinks I have a real shot. Westmore. One of the most exclusive arts programs in the country. If she got in, it would open doors to conservatories, perhaps even Juilliard eventually. It would also cost money we didn't have, scholarship or not. I sipped my coffee, a plan forming. Whatever Adrian Volkov wanted from me, whatever job he was offering, it would pay well. Enough, perhaps, to give Lily the future she deserved. You'll get in, I said with conviction, and we'll make it work. After Lily left for school, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, scrutinizing my reflection. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, testament to a sleepless night. My hair, the same rich brown as Lily's, hung limp around my face. I looked exactly like what I was, a 24-year-old waitress running on exhaustion and cheap coffee. What could someone like Adrian Volkov possibly want with me? The obvious answer made my stomach clench. Men like him took what they desired without consideration for the wants or needs of others. But something about our interaction had felt different. The way he'd spoken about protection, about my sister. The gentle pressure of his hand against mine. I was still puzzling over it when my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Car outside. Now. My heart lurched. It was only 7:30, half an hour early. A test, perhaps, to see how I'd respond to the unexpected. I dressed quickly in the nicest clothes I owned, black slacks and a cream blouse I'd bought for job interviews, paired with the only decent shoes in my closet. Professional, but unremarkable. Invisible. The car waiting outside was neither. Sleek, black, and conspicuously expensive, it hummed at the curb like a predator at rest. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with a military haircut, stepped out as I approached. "Ms. Conti," he said, his voice neutral as he opened the rear door. I hesitated, one foot on the curb, the weight of choice pressing down on me. I could turn around, walk away, pretend last night had never happened. The driver seemed to read my thoughts. "Mr. Volkov doesn't appreciate being kept waiting, Ms. Conti." I slid into the car's leather interior, the door closing behind me with a soft final click. The journey took us from my working-class neighborhood toward the wealthy northern suburbs, where gated communities housed the city's elite. We finally turned onto a private road that wound through manicured grounds, eventually revealing a sprawling mansion set against the backdrop of dense forest. Modern but with classic elements, the house resembled a contemporary castle, all clean lines, glass, and stone. Security cameras were discreetly positioned throughout the grounds, and I noticed at least 2 men patrolling the perimeter as we approached. The driver escorted me to an imposing front door, where a woman in her 50s waited. Dressed in a simple black suit with her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, she exuded efficiency and authority. "Ms. Conti," she said, her accent faintly Eastern European. "I am Mrs. Petrov, Mr. Volkov's household manager. Come." I followed her through a soaring entryway into a house that felt more like a museum than a home. All polished surfaces and expensive art, not a single item out of place. The air smelled of lemon polish and something subtly masculine, the same cedar and spice I'd detected on Adrian the night before. Mrs. Petrov led me to a study at the back of the house, a room dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a pristine garden. "Wait here," she instructed. "Mr. Volkov will join you shortly." Alone, I gravitated toward the windows, taking in the view of sculptured hedges and a stone path leading to what appeared to be a private lake in the distance. Money and power, displayed in every detail. "It's been in my family for 3 generations," Adrian's voice came from behind me. I turned to find him standing in the doorway, looking even more formidable in daylight. He'd traded last night's formal suit for dark trousers and a white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded with muscle. Without the distraction of the restaurant's chaos, I could fully appreciate how dangerously attractive he was, the kind of beauty that warned rather than welcomed. "The estate," he clarified, moving into the room with the fluid grace of a predator. "My grandfather built it after emigrating from St. Petersburg. He wanted something that reminded him of home." I remained silent, uncertain how to respond. This wasn't the conversation I'd expected to have. Adrian studied me, his eyes taking in my carefully chosen outfit, lingering briefly on the pulse point at my throat before meeting my gaze. "You look tired, Alessia." "I didn't sleep well," I admitted. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, I don't imagine you did." He gestured to a seating area. "Sit, please." I perched on the edge of an armchair, while Adrian took the sofa opposite, his posture relaxed but alert. Between us stood a glass coffee table holding a slim folder. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked, his tone conversational. "You said something about a job," I answered carefully. "But I don't understand what kind of work you could possibly want me to do." Adrian leaned forward, opening the folder. Inside were photographs, surveillance images of me leaving work, entering my apartment building, shopping at the corner market with Lily. My breath caught in my throat. "You've been watching me." It wasn't a question. "For approximately 12 hours, he confirmed, remarkably matter-of-fact, standard procedure when someone enters my orbit unexpectedly. "And my sister?" Fear sharpened my voice. "Have you been watching her too?" Something flickered across his features, not quite sympathy, but perhaps understanding. "Your concern for her is admirable. And yes, by extension, we've observed her movements as well. Lily Conti, piano prodigy, straight-A student. Applied for early admission to Berklee College of Music and waiting to hear about the Westmore summer program. Each detail was like a knife twisting in my chest. He knew everything about us, our vulnerabilities, our dreams. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Adrian closed the folder and leaned back, studying me with those penetrating eyes. "Initially, exactly what I said last night. For you to work here, in my home. I need someone I can trust to handle certain aspects of my private life. Someone observant. Someone discreet." His lips curved in a cold smile. "Someone who notices armed men in a crowded restaurant and has the courage to warn a stranger." "I'm a waitress," I said. "Not a... whatever you're looking for. You're underestimating yourself." His tone was almost gentle. "You're intelligent, resourceful, and you understand survival in a way most people never have to learn. These are valuable qualities. The compliments, unexpected and oddly specific, threw me off balance. So, you want me to be what? A personal assistant?" "Among other things." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "The men from last night were connected to a rival organization. They've been watching me for weeks, looking for weaknesses, patterns they could exploit. Thanks to your warning, we were able to identify and neutralize the immediate threat. But the situation is ongoing." A chill ran through me as I began to understand. "You want me to help you identify more of these people?" Adrian shook his head. "I want you to help me create a diversion. A change in my patterns that will confuse their surveillance." "How?" He fixed me with a steady gaze. "By being seen with me, publicly, frequently, as someone important to me." The implication hung in the air between us. He was asking me to pretend to be his lover, or at least someone close enough to alter how his enemies perceived him. "Why me?" I asked. "You could hire an actress, someone trained for this kind of deception." "Because you're genuine," he replied simply. "You have no connections to my world or my enemies, and because you've already demonstrated loyalty without incentive." "I was just trying to prevent violence in my workplace," I protested. His smile was knowing. "We both know that's not the whole truth. You could have alerted security, called the police. Instead, you chose to warn me directly." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "You made a choice, Alessia. Now I'm offering you another one." The choice wasn't really a choice at all, and we both knew it. He'd made that clear with the surveillance photos, with his knowledge of Lily. The threat was implicit beneath the veneer of civilized conversation. "What exactly would this job entail?" I asked, stalling for time to think. "You'd live here," Adrian said. "Accompany me to certain events, help manage my private correspondence and schedule. In return, you'd receive a salary of $15,000 per month, plus a separate educational fund for your sister's continued studies." The figure made me dizzy. It was more money than I'd ever dreamed of having, enough to secure Lily's future and pay off our parents' medical debts. All I had to do was become the companion of one of the most dangerous men in the city, and if I refuse? Adrian didn't answer immediately, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, but left no room for negotiation. "Then you'll return to your apartment and your job, and we'll never speak again." He paused. "But the men watching me will eventually realize you tried to warn me, and they'll wonder why." The threat was clear. By helping him, I'd already made myself a target. His protection was now the only thing standing between me and people who wouldn't hesitate to use me, or Lily, to get to him. My choice had been made the moment I'd slipped him that note. "When do I start?" I asked, resignation and determination mingling in my voice. Adrian's expression softened fractionally. "You already have." The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of adjustments. Mrs. Petrov showed me to a suite of rooms in the east wing of the mansion, a bedroom larger than my entire apartment, connected to a private bathroom with marble fixtures, and a walk-in closet already filled with clothes in my size. I tried not to think about how Adrian knew my measurements, or when he'd arranged for the wardrobe to be prepared. Explaining the situation to Lily had been its own challenge. I'd constructed a story about a live-in personal assistant position for a wealthy businessman, emphasizing the salary and benefits. She'd been suspicious at first, my sudden career change too convenient, too perfect, but her doubts faded when Adrian arranged for a car to take her to and from school each day, and when the first payment appeared in our bank account. "You're like Cinderella," she'd joked during her first visit to the mansion, eyes wide as she took in the opulence. "Except your prince is kind of terrifying." She wasn't wrong. Adrian remained an enigma, simultaneously distant and intensely focused. Some days he barely acknowledged my presence as I learned the rhythms of his household, the security protocols, the stream of visitors who came and went through a private entrance, the coded conversations I was expected to ignore. Other days he'd appear suddenly at my side, asking pointed questions about my observations or opinions. Today marked my first public appearance with him. A charity gala at the city's art museum, where the Volkov family was apparently a major donor. Mrs. Petrov had laid out a gown on my bed. Midnight blue silk that flowed like water. Elegant but understated. The message was clear. Beautiful enough to be on Adrian Volkov's arm, not striking enough to draw attention away from him. I was applying mascara when a knock came at my door. I expected Mrs. Petrov with last-minute instructions, but instead found Adrian himself, resplendent in a tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean waist. "You're not ready." His voice held no accusation, merely observation. "Another 10 minutes," I replied, fighting the urge to cross my arms over my silk robe. "I didn't expect you personally." His eyes traced over me with clinical detachment. "We need to discuss your role tonight." "May I come in?" I stepped aside, acutely aware of his presence as he entered my space, the first time he'd done so since I'd moved in. He remained standing as I returned to the vanity mirror, resuming my makeup application with hands that weren't quite steady. "The people we'll meet tonight believe we've been involved for several weeks," he said, watching my reflection. "Private, discreet, but serious enough that I'm now introducing you to my public world. You'll need to be comfortable with physical contact, familiar gestures." I met his gaze in the mirror. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" "My lover," he corrected, the word sending an involuntary shiver through me. "There's a difference." I put down my mascara, turning to face him directly. "And what is that difference exactly?" Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "A girlfriend implies a certain conventional relationship, dates, meeting friends, future plans." He took a step closer. "What I need to project is something more primal. Possession. Obsession." Heat bloomed in my cheeks. "I'm not sure I can convincingly act that part." "You won't be acting." His voice dropped lower, intimate. "You'll be responding. To me." Before I could process his meaning, Adrian closed the distance between us, one hand sliding to my waist while the other tilted my chin upward. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs as his thumb traced my lower lip. "Your pulse is racing," he observed softly. "Your pupils are dilated. Your breathing has changed." His eyes locked with mine, mesmerizing in their intensity. "Your body already knows how to respond to me, Alessia. All you need to do is stop fighting it." I should have pulled away, should have reminded him that this was a business arrangement, not whatever game he was playing. Instead, I remained motionless, captivated by the heat of his palm against my skin and the scent of him enveloping me. "Tonight, when I touch you like this," his fingers skimmed along my jawline, feather light. "You'll lean into it. When I whisper in your ear, you'll smile as if I've said something that delights you. When my hand rests on your lower back," his palm demonstrated, warm through the thin silk of my robe, "you'll move closer, not away." Each point of contact between us sent electric currents through my body, awakening sensations I'd tried to suppress since our first meeting. This close, I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the faint scar that bisected his left eyebrow, the perfect curve of his mouth. It would be so easy to surrender to the attraction, to let physical desire override the warning bells clanging in my mind. "And if someone asks how we met?" My voice emerged huskier than intended. His lips curved into a smile that transformed his severe features, making him appear younger, almost boyish. "We tell the truth. You were my waitress. You caught my attention. I couldn't stay away." The last part didn't feel like pretense, and that realization was more terrifying than anything else about my situation. Whatever game Adrian Volkov was playing, it went beyond security concerns or public appearances. He released me, stepping back with practiced ease. "Finish getting ready. The car leaves in 20 minutes. As he turned to go, a question escaped me. Adrian. His name felt foreign on my tongue. "What happens if I'm recognized tonight? I've waited tables for half the wealthy people in this city." He paused at the door. "If anyone mentions it, we acknowledge it. Part of your appeal is your authenticity, Alessia. You're not from my world. That makes you interesting to them." His expression hardened slightly. "And it makes you valuable to me." The museum gala was a blur of crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes, and practiced smiles. Adrian kept me close, his hand a constant presence at my waist or against the small of my back. He introduced me simply as Alessia, offering no explanation for my presence, which only seemed to heighten people's curiosity. I recognized several faces from Velvet, A judge who always ordered rare steak, a society matron who complained about the temperature of her soup, a city councilman who tipped poorly despite his expensive watch. None acknowledged our previous interactions directly, though I caught curious glances and whispered conversations. "Ignore them," Adrian murmured against my ear, his breath warm on my skin. "They're trying to decide if you're a passing amusement or a serious interest." "And which am I?" I asked, tilting my head to meet his gaze, conscious of the eyes watching us. Something genuine flashed across his features before his mask of control returned. "That depends on you." Before I could ask what he meant, we were approached by an older man with silver hair and cold eyes that assessed me with naked calculation. "Volkov," he greeted, his accent thicker than Adrian's. "I was beginning to think you'd miss another event." "Breslov." Adrian's posture shifted subtly, tension radiating through the arm that held me close. "I don't recall seeing your name on the donor wall." The man, Breslov, smiled thinly. "Perhaps I prefer to keep my generosity private." His gaze shifted to me. "Aren't you going to introduce your lovely companion?" Adrian's fingers tightened fractionally on my waist. "Alessia, this is Victor Breslov, an old family associate." The way he emphasized old suggested a history I couldn't begin to understand. I extended my hand, which Breslov took, holding it longer than necessary. "Enchanting," he said, eyes lingering on the neckline of my gown. I was surprised to hear Adrian had found someone worthy of his attention. Now I see the attraction. Adrian's body went rigid beside me, though his expression remained impassive. "Your approval wasn't sought, Victor." Breslov released my hand, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Nevertheless, you have it. She's quite different from your usual type." He switched to what sounded like Russian, words flowing too quickly for me to catch even if I'd understood the language. Whatever he said caused a dangerous stillness to come over Adrian. When he replied, his voice was low and controlled, but edged with something that made the hair on my arms stand up. Breslov laughed, a harsh sound that contained no humor. Of course. Forgive an old man his curiosity." He nodded to me. "A pleasure, my dear. I look forward to seeing more of you." As he walked away, I felt Adrian exhale slowly. "What was that about?" I asked quietly. "Politics," he replied tersely. "Breslov heads what's left of the old Russian syndicate. My father displaced them years ago, but they maintain interest in the city. He seemed to know something about me." Adrian's jaw tightened. "He was fishing, trying to determine your significance." "And what did you tell him?" His eyes met mine, something fierce and possessive darkening them. "That you are under my protection, that anyone who approaches you approaches me." A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Is he dangerous?" "Everyone here is dangerous, Alessia." Adrian's voice softened. "But yes, Breslov particularly so. He lost power to my family and has never forgotten it." I glanced across the room, finding Breslov watching us with undisguised interest. "He was one of them, wasn't he? Connected to the men at the restaurant?" Adrian nodded almost imperceptibly. "We think so. Which means your presence beside me tonight has already served its purpose. You've confirmed their suspicions that I've developed a weakness." The realization hit me with sudden clarity. "I'm not a diversion. I'm bait." His fingers touched my chin, turning my face back to his. "You're much more than that, Alessia, but yes, in part." He studied me, concern briefly crossing his features. "Does that frighten you?" It should have. Any sane person would be terrified to be used as a pawn in a game between rival crime organizations. But what frightened me more was the realization that I trusted Adrian to protect me, a man I barely knew, whose world was built on violence and control. "No," I answered truthfully. "What frightens me is that I'm starting to forget this isn't real." Something vulnerable flashed in his eyes, gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Who says it isn't?" Before I could respond, he led me toward the dance floor, where couples moved in elegant patterns beneath the museum's soaring dome. Adrian's hand settled at my waist, drawing me closer than propriety dictated as we began to move to the music. "They're all watching us," he murmured, his cheek brushing against my temple. "Breslov, his associates, my people, all trying to determine what you mean to me. And what do I mean to you? I asked, the question escaping before I could reconsider. His hand splayed possessively across my lower back, heat radiating through the thin fabric of my gown. You're becoming a complication I didn't anticipate. It wasn't an answer, yet somehow it revealed more than a direct response might have. In Adrian's world, complications were dangerous, to be eliminated, not embraced. Yet here I was, in his arms, more entangled in his life with each passing day. As the music swelled around us, I made a decision. If I was to survive this game, I needed to play it on my own terms. I leaned into him, letting my body melt against his, my hand sliding from his shoulder to the nape of his neck in a gesture that couldn't be mistaken for anything but intimate familiarity. Adrian's eyes darkened, his steps faltering momentarily before he regained control. "Careful, Alessia," he warned, voice low. "Don't start something you're not prepared to finish." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm just playing my part." "Isn't that what you wanted?" His lips curved into a smile that held equal parts appreciation and warning. "What I want," he replied, pulling me impossibly closer, "is considerably more complicated than that." The morning after the gala, I woke to find a small jewelry box outside my door. Inside, a delicate gold bracelet with a single charm, a tiny key that caught the light as it moved. No note, no explanation, but I knew it was from Adrian. A symbol perhaps of the trust he was beginning to place in me, or maybe a more ominous message, that I now possessed a key that could either lock or unlock something dangerous. I wore it anyway, the gold warm against my skin as I moved through my new daily routine. Mrs. Petrov had taken to teaching me the inner workings of Adrian's household, which staff members were permitted in which areas, the sophisticated security systems that monitored every entrance, the schedule of maintenance workers who required supervision. "Mr. Volkov values his privacy," she explained as we walked the perimeter of the estate, her accent thickening whenever she spoke his name. "You must learn to recognize who belongs and who does not." The subtext was clear. I was being trained to spot potential threats, to recognize patterns and irregularities. My role was expanding beyond mere public appearances to something more integrated with Adrian's security concerns. I was reviewing staff schedules in the study when Adrian entered, dressed in his customary dark suit despite the summer heat. He'd been absent since the gala, leaving before dawn the morning after, and communicating only through brief text messages. "You're back," I said, setting aside the tablet I'd been working on. Adrian studied me, his gaze lingering on the bracelet at my wrist. "Did you think I'd abandoned you?" "I thought you might be avoiding me," I admitted. Our dance at the gala, the intensity between us, it had crossed a line from performance into something dangerously real. He moved to the window, looking out over the gardens where security personnel patrolled at regular intervals. Breslov made his move, as we anticipated. 2 of his associates attempted to access one of our shipping warehouses last night. A chill ran through me. Were they caught? Yes. The single word held a finality that required no elaboration. I didn't ask what had happened to them, and Adrian didn't volunteer the information. Another unspoken rule of our arrangement. I was to know enough to be useful, not enough to be legally compromised. "So, your plan worked," I said, using me as a distraction. Adrian turned from the window, his expression uncharacteristically open. "It wasn't just a plan, Alessia. Breslov needed to believe I had developed a genuine vulnerability, a weakness he could exploit. And have you?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. He closed the distance between us, reaching out to touch the bracelet on my wrist, his fingers warm against my pulse point. "What do you think?" The air between us seemed to charge with electricity, the same dangerous current I'd felt the night of the gala. Adrian's hand moved from my wrist to my face, tracing the line of my cheekbone with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. "I think this is becoming complicated," I whispered, echoing his words from the night before. Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. "It was complicated the moment you slipped me that note at the restaurant." His thumb brushed my lower lip, the touch sending sparks through my body. "The question is whether we embrace the complication or continue pretending it's just business." I should have stepped away, reminded him and myself that I was here under duress, that my presence in his life was a transaction, not a choice. Instead, I leaned into his touch, allowing myself to acknowledge the attraction that had been building since our first meeting. "I don't know how to navigate this," I admitted. "Your world, these feelings, they're foreign to me." Adrian's expression softened. "You're doing better than you realize." He hesitated, then added, "I've never brought anyone into my home before, not like this." The confession surprised me. Why me? And don't say it's because I warned you at the restaurant. There has to be more. His hand dropped from my face, but he remained close enough that I could detect the subtle scent of his cologne and feel the heat radiating from his body. "The first time I saw you at Velvet, you were different," he said quietly. "Everyone else in that restaurant was performing. The staff with their practiced smiles, the patrons with their cultivated importance, but you moved with authenticity. Genuine grace under genuine pressure." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "And then you looked at me, really looked, in a way no one has in years. Not as a Volkov, not as a power to be feared or courted, but as a person you were assessing on your own terms." I remembered that moment, our eyes meeting across the crowded restaurant, the jolt of recognition that had passed between us before I'd dropped my gaze. "You were watching me before that night," I realized, "before I ever noticed you." Adrian nodded, unapologetic. "I come to Velvet often. You caught my attention weeks earlier. I was curious." The implications of his admission settled over me like a physical weight. My involvement in his world hadn't been chance or circumstance. He'd been observing me, perhaps even planning to approach me before I'd ever slipped him that warning note. "So I was always meant to end up here," I said, uncertain whether the realization made me feel better or worse. "With you. I believe in making my own fate, Alessia." His voice dropped lower, intimate. "And since that first night at Velvet, I've wanted you to be part of mine." The raw honesty in his words struck me more powerfully than any elaborate declaration might have. Adrian Volkov, a man who orchestrated his world with calculated precision, admitting to an impulse he hadn't fully controlled or understood. Before I could respond, his phone vibrated. He checked the screen, his expression immediately hardening into the mask of authority I'd come to recognize. "Security matter," he said tersely. "We'll continue this conversation later." As he turned to leave, I caught his wrist, surprising both of us with the boldness of the gesture. "Adrian." His name felt right on my lips now, no longer foreign. "Be careful." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps at my concern. He raised my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my palm that lingered longer than necessary. "Always," he murmured against my skin. After he left, I remained in the study, my mind racing as I tried to process this shift in our dynamic. The line between performance and reality was blurring, complicated by genuine attraction and the strange intimacy that had developed between us over the past week. I was still lost in thought when Mrs. Petrov appeared in the doorway, her expression even more severe than usual. "You have a visitor," she announced, disapproval evident in her tone, in the front parlor. Confused, I wasn't aware I was allowed visitors. I followed her through the mansion to the formal sitting room near the entrance. The person waiting there made my heart stop. "Marco," I said in disbelief. Marco Rivera, the floor manager from Velvet, stood awkwardly in the center of the room, looking distinctly out of place among the antique furniture and artwork. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, his eyes darting nervously around the space. "Alessia," he exhaled my name with obvious relief. "Thank God. I wasn't sure they'd let me see you." Mrs. Petrov remained in the doorway, her posture making it clear she was monitoring our interaction. I motioned for Marco to sit, taking the chair opposite him. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Marco leaned forward, his expression urgent. "I needed to warn you. People have been asking about you at the restaurant. Dangerous people." He glanced toward Mrs. Petrov, then back to me. "They showed up 2 days ago. Russians, I think. Asking how long you'd worked there, whether you knew Volkov before that night." A chill ran through me. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. I said you'd quit without notice, that I didn't know anything about your connection to Volkov." his hands twisted together anxiously. But Alessia, they knew where you lived, your old apartment. They mentioned Lily. Fear, sharp and immediate, sliced through me. Lily? Is she okay? She's fine, Marco assured me quickly. When they came around asking, I called that number, the one on the card you left for emergencies. Within an hour, some guys showed up at the restaurant. Volkov's men, I guess. They handled it. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by fresh concern. If Breslov's people were looking into my background, asking about Lily. How did you find this place? I asked, suddenly suspicious. Adrian's home address wasn't public knowledge. Marco looked down. One of Volkov's guys brought me, said I should tell you directly what happened. He hesitated. Alessia, what's going on? Are you in some kind of trouble? Is he forcing you to be here? The question was so at odds with the complex reality of my situation that I almost laughed. It's complicated, Marco, but I'm safe. And I'm here by choice. The words felt true as I spoke them. Despite the circumstances that had brought me to Adrian's home, Marco studied my face, clearly not entirely convinced. If you need help... I don't, I interrupted firmly. But thank you for coming to warn me about Lily. Mrs. Petrov cleared her throat pointedly. Ms. Conti, Mr. Volkov has returned and wishes to speak with you in his study. Marco stood, taking the hint. Just be careful, Alessia. Whatever's happening here, these aren't people to mess around with. I walked him to the door, where one of Adrian's security men waited to escort him off the property. As I watched him leave, I felt a strange sense of finality, as if the last thread connecting me to my old life had just been severed. When I entered the study, Adrian was standing by the window, his posture rigid with contained tension. Your former manager, he said without turning. He told you about Breslov's men at the restaurant? Yes, I confirmed. And that they mentioned Lily. Adrian turned then, his expression grave. I've increased security around her school and arranged for one of my people to stay in your old apartment building. She'll be protected, Alessia, I promise you that. The sincerity in his voice should have comforted me, but it only heightened my awareness of the danger I'd brought into my sister's life. This isn't what I signed up for, I said quietly. Lily being threatened because of my connection to you. No, Adrian agreed, moving closer. It's not. And if you want out, I'll arrange it. New identities, a new city, enough money to start over. His eyes held mine, unexpectedly vulnerable, but I'd prefer you stay. His honesty disarmed me. He was offering me freedom, a chance to escape with my sister, to leave his dangerous world behind, and yet... I don't want to run, I admitted, surprising myself with the truth of it. But I need to know Lily will be safe. Adrian reached for me then, his hands framing my face with unexpected gentleness. I will protect what's precious to you as if it were precious to me, he promised, his voice low and fervent. No harm will come to her, or to you. Not while I draw breath. I believed him. God help me, I believed him. 3 days after Marco's visit, Adrian took me to see Lily. We met at a private room in an upscale restaurant downtown, neutral territory that wouldn't expose my sister to Adrian's home or the full extent of his security apparatus. Lily was already waiting when we arrived, her eyes widening as she took in Adrian's imposing presence beside me. So you're the boss, she said bluntly, extending her hand with the fearlessness of youth. The one who's been keeping my sister so busy. Adrian's lips curved into the ghost of a smile as he shook her hand. And you're the pianist. Alessia speaks of you often. I watched their interaction with a mixture of anxiety and fascination, my two worlds colliding in ways I'd never anticipated. Adrian treated Lily with a respectful attentiveness I'd rarely seen him extend to others, asking genuine questions about her music and studies, listening to her responses with actual interest rather than polite pretense. You should hear her play, I told Adrian as our meals arrived. She's incredible. Lily blushed, pushing food around her plate. The Westmore audition is in 2 days. I'm still not sure my Chopin is ready. You'll be perfect, I assured her, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. Adrian observed our exchange, something unreadable passing across his features. I have connections at Westmore, he said casually. If you'd like, I could... No, Lily interrupted, surprising both of us with her firmness. Thank you, but no. I want to get in on my own merits. Instead of offense, respect flickered in Adrian's eyes. I understand, but the offer stands if you change your mind. After lunch, as Adrian stepped away to take a call, Lily leaned across the table toward me. He's not what I expected, she whispered. The way he looks at you, it's like you're the only person in the room. Heat crept up my neck. It's complicated. Life usually is. She studied me with eyes too perceptive for her age. You've changed, Leslie. You seem, I don't know, more confident, less afraid. Her observation startled me, but I realized she was right. The constant anxiety that had been my companion since our parents' deaths, the fear of not being able to provide, of failing her, had receded. Not because of Adrian's wealth or protection, but because of how he'd drawn out a strength in me I hadn't known I possessed. Are you happy? Lily asked directly. The question caught me off guard. Was I happy? The word seemed inadequate for the complex emotions I'd experienced since entering Adrian's world. Desire, fear, exhilaration, belonging, all intertwined in ways I couldn't fully unravel. I'm becoming who I need to be, I answered honestly. And yes, in ways I didn't expect, I think I am happy. Her smile was knowing beyond her years. Then that's all that matters. Later that night, as Adrian's driver took us back to the estate, I found myself watching his profile in the dim light of the car's interior. The sharp line of his jaw, the focused intensity in his eyes as he reviewed something on his phone, the way his presence filled the space around him without effort. Thank you, I said quietly, for today, for being kind to Lily. Adrian set his phone aside, his gaze meeting mine. She's remarkable, very much like her sister. He paused, something vulnerable crossing his features. My father would have disapproved of today. Mixing family with business. He considered it a weakness. Is that what I am to you? Business? The question hung between us, loaded with all the unspoken tensions and attractions of the past weeks. Adrian reached across the seat, his fingers intertwining with mine with a naturalness that belied the complexity of our relationship. You haven't been just business since the moment you slipped me that note, he admitted. Perhaps even before. The weight of his words settled over me, warming places that had been cold for too long. We rode the rest of the way in silence, our hands still joined, the contact saying more than words could articulate. When we arrived at the estate, Adrian surprised me by leading me not to the main house, but to a smaller structure nestled among the gardens, a glass conservatory filled with rare orchids and tropical plants, illuminated by soft lights that created an otherworldly atmosphere. This was my mother's, he explained, guiding me along a stone path between exotic blooms. Before she died, it's the one place on the property my father never entered. I understood the significance of him bringing me here, showing me something personal, a glimpse of the man beneath the calculated exterior of Adrian Volkov, crime boss and feared enforcer. It's beautiful, I said, trailing my fingers over a delicate purple blossom. Peaceful. Adrian watched me move through the space, his expression softening in a way I'd rarely seen. I come here when I need to remember there's beauty in the world, he said quietly. When the weight of family obligations and necessary violence becomes too heavy, the admission, so honest, so unexpectedly vulnerable, touched something deep within me. Without thinking, I moved toward him, closing the distance between us until we stood merely inches apart. Thank you for showing me this, I whispered, for letting me see this part of you. His hand rose to my face, fingertips tracing my cheekbone with a reverence that made my heart race. You see more of me than anyone has in a very long time, Alessia. The tension between us, building for weeks in glances and careful touches, finally crested like a wave breaking against shore. I leaned into him as his mouth found mine, the kiss gentle at first, then deepening with an intensity that made me cling to his shoulders for support. His arms encircled me, pulling me against the solid wall of his chest, one hand tangling in my hair as the other pressed against the small of my back. It felt inevitable, this surrender to what had been growing between us since that first night at the restaurant. Not just desire, though that burned hot and insistent where our bodies pressed together, but a recognition of finding someone who understood the shadows we each carried, the compromises we'd made to protect what we loved. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, Adrian rested his forehead against mine. His eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "This complicates everything," he murmured, echoing our earlier conversations. I smiled, feeling strangely light despite the weight of implications. "I think we were complicated from the start." His answering smile, rare and genuine, transformed his face, revealing the man who might have existed in another life, one untouched by family legacies and underworld politics. The peace of the moment shattered as Adrian's phone vibrated. The change that came over him was immediate, his posture straightening, expression hardening as he read the message on the screen. "What is it?" I asked, recognizing the signs of trouble. "Breslov," he answered tersely. "He's made another move, this time against someone under my protection." Cold fear gripped my chest. "Lily?" "No," Adrian assured me quickly. "Not your sister, one of my lieutenants. But the message is clear. He's escalating." The reality of Adrian's world crashed back into the intimate bubble we'd created, a harsh reminder that our relationship existed within the context of power struggles and violent retribution. "What will you do?" I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. Adrian's eyes met mine, unflinching. "What's necessary? Breslov has violated the understanding between our organizations. There must be consequences." I nodded, accepting this part of him even as it frightened me. "When?" "Tonight." He touched my face gently, a contrast to the deadly intent now evident in his bearing. "Go back to the house, Alessia. Stay with Mrs. Petrov. I'll return when it's done." As he turned to leave, I caught his arm. "Adrian." His name felt right on my lips, intimate and familiar now. "Be careful." Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. He pulled me to him for one more bruising kiss, his hands gripping me with an intensity that spoke of his reluctance to let go. "Always," he promised against my lips. The night that followed was the longest of my life. I paced the floors of the mansion, unable to sleep, imagining every terrible possibility as hours stretched into the early morning. Mrs. Petrov brought tea I couldn't drink and reassurances I couldn't believe, her own worry visible beneath her composed exterior. It was nearly dawn when I heard the cars returning, the low murmur of voices in the courtyard. I rushed to the window, relief flooding through me as I spotted Adrian emerging from a black SUV, apparently unharmed. Our eyes met across the distance as he looked up at my window, a silent communication passing between us before he disappeared into the house. Minutes later, he appeared at my door, his suit immaculate, but his eyes haunted by whatever had transpired. "It's done," he said simply. I didn't ask for details, didn't need to know what done entailed. Instead, I drew him into my room, helping him remove his jacket and tie, my hands gentle as I unbuttoned his shirt. There was blood on his cuffs, not his own, I realized with a mixture of relief and horror. "Breslov?" I asked quietly. Adrian shook his head, alive, but diminished. "He's agreed to certain terms. The conflict is over, for now." I led him to the bathroom, wetting a cloth with warm water to clean away the evidence of violence from his hands. He submitted to my ministrations with an unexpected docility, watching my face as if searching for disgust or fear. Instead, he found acceptance. Not of what he'd done, but of who he was, the entirety of Adrian Volkov, both the man who loved his mother's conservatory and the one who dealt in necessary violence to protect what was his. "You should be afraid of me," he said softly as I finished, his hands now clean, but the memory of blood between us. Any sensible person would run. I met his gaze steadily. "I stopped being sensible the night I slipped you that note." He pulled me against his chest, burying his face in my hair with a shuddering exhale that revealed more vulnerability than he'd likely shown anyone in years. "Stay with me," he whispered, the words somewhere between a command and a plea. "Not because you have to, not for Lily's security or your own protection. Stay because you want to." In that moment, the pretense fell away completely. This wasn't about roles or arrangements or necessary deceptions. This was Adrian, powerful, dangerous, and unexpectedly human, asking me to choose him with full knowledge of all that choice entailed. I lifted my face to his, seeing in his eyes the same conflict that had been warring within me. Duty versus desire. Caution versus connection. Fear versus the rare and precious chance at something real. "I'll stay," I promised, sealing the words with a kiss that tasted of new beginnings and accepted risks. "I choose this. I choose you." Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the estate, illuminating the grounds where armed men still patrolled and dangers still lurked. But within the shelter of Adrian's arms, I found a strange and unexpected peace. The calm certainty that sometimes the greatest risks bring the greatest rewards. My journey had begun with a desperate warning scribbled on a napkin. It would continue in ways I couldn't yet imagine, in a world of shadows and power I was only beginning to understand. But for now, this was enough. The knowledge that in finding Adrian Volkov, I had also somehow found myself.